On today's question of faith, can sickness be a gift? Hey everybody, this is Question of Faith. I am Deacon Mike Hayes. I am the Young Adult Ministry Director here in the Diocese of Cleveland.
And I am Father Damian Ferentz, the Vicar for Evangelization, and as of April 1st, the new parochial vicar at the Cathedral of St. John the Evangelist.
Woohoo! Breaking news now.
Breaking news, baby. Yeah, so it'll be officially announced on April 1st, but I received my letter of appointment yesterday on the Feast of St. Joseph, which is pretty cool. So if you're not aware, I served the diocese as the secretary for Parish Life and Special Ministries for 3 years, and there is currently a merging of two secretariats, the Office of Catechetics and Secretary for Parish Life and Special Ministries. The director of catechetical ministry is going to oversee both departments and may eventually take on a new name. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. But in the meantime, because I was relieved of that duty, I am going to be a parish priest for the first time since 2007. I'm super excited. I'll remain vicar for evangelization, so still living downtown at the cathedral, still have my office on the 5th floor, but I also get to do stuff that I think I'm pretty good at, preaching, teaching, hearing confessions, funerals, hospital calls, weddings, the stuff that most priests, when they go to the seminary, they think that's what they're going to be doing. So special ministry is cool, but like the parish is where it's at. So I'm super excited to be back.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah.
So speaking of being back, you are back, but you were out for a while because you were sick. So tell us about it.
Sick isn't the word. I mean, now I don't generally get sick. Like, I'm pretty healthy. I take pretty good care of myself. I try to maintain distance from people who are sick. I'm a slight hypochondriac, right? But I don't know where I picked this thing up, but something's been going around, and I ended up getting influenza A. Sounds dreadful.
That's going around because Father Don Alexiak had it too.
So we'll blame him. Yeah. It's interesting because I haven't even been near him, so I can't even blame him. Right. But yeah, no, it just kind of knocked me down for the count. I had been like coughing up a lung, and
was it all respiratory?
Yeah,
fever?
Totally. No, chills.
Oh, terrible.
But it's only slight. Like, I'm never cold. And so I'm sitting in my apartment. I'm like, man, kind of chilly in here. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And Marion's like, you're never cold. You must be sick. And I was like, yeah, I'm feeling something coming on. And then, so it started like as a nasally kind of thing. And I thought I knocked that out. Usually when I get something like that, I can knock it out in a couple of days with, over-the-counter stuff, So I did that, and then I seemed to be okay. I actually took a couple of days off of work because I knew something was coming on. And then, which I never do.
Yeah, you are very faithful, reliable. I don't remember you ever being sick, and I've known you now for 4 years.
Yeah,
so.
This is the first time I think I've been sick since I've been here.
More than a day or something.
Yeah, the first time I ever took any like significant time off that wasn't vacation.
Right.
Other than like the death of my mother, right? That's about it. But man, like I went to the Right of Election downtown. I went to OCIA. I came to work the next day on Monday.
Yeah.
I went to OCIA on Monday night, and I woke up on Tuesday, and you and I were together, and I was like, oh man, I'm not feeling too good. And I told Dr. Knight when he was here, I was like, just keep your distance from me, man. I don't know what's going on. And after the podcast, I went upstairs to edit it. I finished editing it. I'm walking down the hall, and I had forgotten something up in the studio.
Yep.
And I stood by the elevator, and I coughed uncontrollably for like 30 seconds to the point that Francine Costatini comes down the hall and was like, are you okay? And I was like, no, I am not. And so I just went home. I had finished editing.
Yeah,
I said, look, I called Greg and said, look, I'm just going to go home. And that was the last time I was here until today.
Well, oftentimes sickness is the absolute worst, and you have to rest, and we're both pretty active guys, and that can be hard to do. And then let someone else take care of you and all that. the question of this podcast is, can sickness be a gift? Can it be a blessing and not just a curse? And what are your thoughts on that? Is it too early to say, or were there any graces that came because of your sickness?
I think there is. I mean, I think that, number one, it gives you the chance to kind of slow down. I've been burned the candle at both ends, as I like to say, me and my 5 jobs, there's a lot going on. And this kind of gave me the opportunity to kind of sit back a little bit and say, okay, what am I really doing here? Am I working too hard? Am I doing too much? Let me slow down and organize my life a little bit. I'm caring for my sister who's going into nursing, and so I got some stuff done for her while I was home that I probably couldn't do at any high level if I'm working at the same time. We've got a parish retreat coming up, right? So it gave me an opportunity to kind of think about that a little bit. But at the same time, it also gave me the opportunity not to think about things, to say, okay, I've got some time just to rest.
Right.
And I think I really needed to do that because it's just, the only thing you could really do to knock this out is really sleep.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like I slept every day till about 11. It was really good.
Your body needs it. I know that most of the time when I get sick, it's because I push myself too hard. I wear down my immune system, and my body, this is my body's way and my soul's way of saying, slow down, boy, and rest. And then maybe it's 3 days where I'm just laying on the couch or laying in bed. And I remember last time I think that's when I started watching Ted Lasso. And I had watched Greta Gerwig's Little Women. But I would never watch TV during the day or in the afternoon.
Yeah, same.
Or lay on the couch. But if we push ourselves too hard, our bodies and our souls have a way of correcting that. And sometimes it is by getting sick. So it could be a great grace that the Lord enters in that way and says, hey, now think about this. And I can say this. I've gotten better about taking breaks and not feeling guilty. So I pray in the morning, I work out in the afternoon. I think you know that about me. But the other thing that I've been doing, if I have talks in the evening, and during Lent I have a ton of them, and I think are you doing a parish mission now or something? Or no?
I got parish retreat the end of the month. Yeah.
Yeah. So and even tonight I'm starting the book study on the bishop's pastoral letter. So I'm going to be out for 2.5 hours this evening. So in the afternoon we have a little balcony over at the Rectory Cathedral, and if the sun's out, I'll go out there and just read for a half hour or 45 minutes.
Nice. And
that's not me being lazy or taking off work. I'm actually feeding my mind, feeding my heart, and that's good stuff for me to do. And I something about being an American, particularly in this part of the country where we define ourselves often by our hard work, that can get us in trouble too because we don't take proper rest and then we wind up getting sick. So,
was that different for you when you studied abroad?
I had a very strict writing schedule that I kept to, and because it worked, I didn't feel the guilt about it. It was actually Flannery O'Connor's writing schedule. So she wrote every day. She went to Mass in the morning and then wrote from 9 to noon, and that was it. And if that's all you do with maybe a 5-minute coffee break for 3 hours, that's exhausting. That's a lot of work. And then the rest of the day I could read and walk, and I didn't feel bad about it. Now, there were some guys that I lived with that they're like, you should work an 8-hour day. I'm like, not if you're a writer. If you put in 3 solid hours, that's enough. That's like being a football player. You played a football game, and you only do that once a week. Or a baseball player. You don't have to work an 8 hour. You don't write for 8 hours a day. I don't know anyone who can do that. So I think because I had that discipline built in, it worked. And because I wrote my dissertation in a pretty quick amount of time, I didn't feel bad about it. But sometimes maybe it's in my heart or in my head, or some little jab comments that you'll hear from time to time, like, oh, you're just kind of laying out and reading a book. It's called leisure, and it's healthy. It's healthy. So I think, and then I think if people in positions that we have do that, then we can model for other people, oh, I can do that too then. And then you don't pass on the workaholism, because the leisure is really important. But I think it's something to constantly work at. And as Aristotle would say, usually we lean to one extreme or another.
Yeah,
Either
right.
we're workaholics or we're lazy by nature. So you have to push yourself to the other extreme to find that middle ground. So if you're always working, you got to push yourself to rest. And if you're sedentary and just like phlegmatic and like to sit around, you have to push yourself to work. And then both will find that golden mean in the middle there.
Yeah. Yeah, and so, our question for today was, can sickness be a gift? It's a shame that sometimes we have to get sick in order to slow things down instead of doing this on a regular basis.
Yep.
My mom was sick most of her life.
Mine too.
Yeah, and I think one of the gifts that I got from her was saying, hey, look, life is precious. There are things I can't do anymore, because I'm just crippled up,
right.
With rheumatoid arthritis. She couldn't move some days, and but for her, it was like an opportunity to sit and to pray. Number one, was a big part of her life, and but number two, it was also like an opportunity for her to kind of reflect back on the things that she had done and on the gift that she was to so many people, and I think that was a great comfort to her. I don't think she would have thought about it if she wasn't laid up as much as she was.
Yeah. And being sick, too, makes you dependent on others, and particularly dependent upon God for help, because we human beings in our fallen nature want to be so self-sufficient. I want to take care of myself. I don't want anyone to take care of me. I'm strong. I'm healthy. Well, okay, but eventually you won't be, or someone in your life won't be, and then you'll have to deal with that. And so this is why there's something, we even call it sin sickness sometimes, that, again, Flannery O'Connor says that sin can be a good thing because it can lead people back to God.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, oh, I did that, but I realized, I hit rock bottom, I got to come back, like the prodigal son. Speaking of O'Connor, I'm heading to Georgia this weekend because she'll be turning 100 years old if she was alive today. So there's some celebrations in Savannah on Friday and Saturday, and then I'm heading to Milledgeville the next few days, where she lived for the last 14 years of her life. In fact, after she finished her MFA at Iowa, her hope was to live in New York City with all the other writers, and that was the great writing community, and never have to go back to Georgia except maybe on a holiday to visit her mom. And what happened was she was diagnosed with lupus when she was 25 years old. That was the same disease that killed her dad. And so because of the medications, she had to be on crutches, and she needed fresh air. So she had to move back with her mother to a 500-acre farm 4 miles outside of the city of Milledgeville, on a working dairy farm. But that's where she wrote every day. And she was sick, and she knew that she was dying. She knew she didn't have a lot of time. And I think it was because of that she was so focused in her craft. She didn't waste any time. She wrote every day from 9 to noon, including Sundays, because she was dying of lupus. But that brought out greatness in her. Yeah. And sometimes that can be our story too, because of sickness, because of hurts, because of pains, because of a fall in life. We can wind up allowing God in our lives in a way there because we had nowhere else to turn. I like to talk about it like when I first had my first adult conversion, like came to Christ because he was just wooed me my senior year of high school. And I loved baseball. I loved my friends. I loved, hanging out and art and all that. But when I found Christ, not just as a friend, but best friend, Savior, my life changed. I'm like, I'm going to give it to him. If that means seminary, boom, go. And it was a really easy decision. But then what I talk about as my second conversion was the year before, 2001, 9/11 happened. Mm-hmm. 2 months later, my mom died. A couple months after that, Boston abuse scandal. A couple months after that, Cleveland abuse scandal breaks. And then that was the summer before I was going to be ordained a deacon. And that was terrible. And I had, I thought marriage would be a better option at this point because why would anyone want to be a priest? And all these things were going on in my heart. And that was the point in my life where I had, for the first time, to completely rely upon God in my brokenness. And it worked. But I don't know if I would have been there had it not been for the sickness, the pain. Yeah.
Yeah. Like when I was 25, so for many years, so I had a college roommate named Dave, right? Dave was a stand-up comic, was the funniest person I think I've ever met in my entire life. And all of that comedy came from pain because he was dying. He died when he was 25.
Yeah.
And I could remember, like, our senior year, he got pretty sick, ended up in the hospital, had to put a defibrillator in because his heart just wasn't beating right, and he very nearly died our senior year. And I think it kind of woke a lot of us up as we were heading out of college.
Yeah.
We're like, what are we going to do with the rest of our lives? And time is, time can be limited. None of us are promised tomorrow. And at the same time, like, it all forced us in some way to take our friendship with him a lot more serious. So when he did die 3 years later, we didn't waste any time with him.
Yeah.
We were always with that guy, and I think it was a really big wake-up call for me in many ways. And it was kind of the beginning, too, of, like, me thinking about ministry just in general. It's like, okay, I've got this career in radio, and it's going okay. It's not going great, but it's going all right. And, at the end of the day, and this is not to denigrate anybody in the media, but at the end of the day, I was like, yeah, we did a good show today. Okay. What else you got?
Yeah, yeah. It's the longing for more. It's like the deep, an infinite mystery, and not just things that can be measured here. I felt the same way I loved baseball, but then I thought there's got to be more. There's more to life than baseball as an 18-year-old. And I mean, it sounds cheesy, but it wasn't my only way I defined myself. But as a baseball player, I'm like, this isn't satisfying me. I like it a lot, but no, there's more. There's more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even as a baseball announcer, for me, it was like, okay, those, And people would come to our, the minor league games that I did for a while. They were like, hey, you guys do a good job at these games. We're like, okay, yeah, great, thanks.
Yeah.
Like, all right.
Yeah, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough. If it's not God, it's never enough. It could be a relationship. It could be money. It could be a job. It could be a promotion and whatever, and it lasts for a little while, and then you're like, gosh, there's more. My heart longs, and
My friends even noticed that I cared more about the players as people than I did about the game. It's about broadcasting the game on its own. But they said, wow, you really took some time with those, the high school students that maybe you were doing PA announcement for, like you really have taken an interest in them in some way. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I think you're right. And then, dumb me, right? You're never thinking in the background of what could really be happening here, until you actually think about what's going on.
Yeah.
And I found, like doing retreats and things like that at my parish were bringing me a lot more life than producing radio.
The more.
Yeah. And yet here we are.
Yeah.
Like it all comes back full circle regardless.
Right. Well, and here we are. On the first day of spring, Kayla Gill told me that this morning.
Oh, that's right.
I didn't know that. But also in our Lenten season, which is the church's way to remind us that we can't have eternal springtime here.
Yeah.
Life is dying and it is rising, and we keep ourselves from certain things. Like we pray more intensely during Lent. We fast, not because food is bad or Instagram is bad or whatever you've given up is bad, but because there's a greater good and it makes us long for that, And then the almsgiving too, like, okay, I have these things, but I can't keep anything. Like love is meant to be given away. And so the church allows us to be reminded we're made for more. And when we intentionally keep ourselves, when we do fasting, we much more greatly enjoy the feasting,
Sure.
Yeah, it's like the rhythm of life. I was thinking too, I'm giving these book studies starting tonight at the Browsing Bookstore and Cafe down in the Galleria.
On the Galleria, yeah.
And there's a section in the bishop's new pastoral letter where he says this. He says, have you ever noticed that the times in our lives when we grow the most, when we learn the most, when we become more of who God made us to be, are almost always preceded by some difficult time, some pain, sorrow, suffering, heartache, or loss. And then he says, that's the Good Friday experience. When we stay faithful through those Good Friday experiences and trust that the Lord will raise us from the dead as he raised Jesus on Easter Sunday, we are able to experience the power of his resurrection in our own lives. And ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
Like, if you go on a Kairos retreat or a tech retreat or the Believe Land retreat, Christ Renews His Parish, Curcio, even like 12-step program where someone's giving a lead, most of the time they'll take you through a moment in their life that was difficult, painful, where they felt like dying. And it's in that dying, there really is a death to something old, that something new emerges. And even in the sickness business, it's like you're in the sickness, you long for health, and then when you get the health, you're like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not sick anymore. But in some ways, and Colbert said this in that famous interview about his dad. He said, and it was in the GQ interview before that, and I know that because I had to pay $500 to GQ to use that in my first book. But he says he calls it loving the bomb. When you get to a point in your life where you can say, I am grateful that happened. Oh, I hated it, but I'm so grateful that happened because it allowed me to do this. And I know for myself, my mom died a year before I was ordained. It was the first person I was ever with when she died. I was around death a lot that year because she was dying for 53 weeks. She went through 8 different roommates at the cancer home run by the Dominicans.
Wow.
But I was around death and sickness, suffering so much that was a great gift as a priest because I've never been afraid to go to an emergency room, hospice, visit someone in their home. And that was a gift given to me by my mom. Do I wish that didn't happen? In some ways, yes, but I'm also so grateful it happened because it gave me the depth that I have for understanding other people in sickness and death, and family members too.
Yeah.
Like if you've never experienced that yourself and you're up there giving some homily, you're going to sound like that redheaded priest at the beginning of Gran Torino who says, life is bittersweet. It's bitter in the death and sweet in the resurrection. But he'd never suffered.
That's right.
He knew it all in a book.
Yeah.
But when he goes through the accompaniment with Mr. Kowalski, what's his name?
Yeah.
Dirty Harry. What's his name?
Clint Eastwood.
Clint Eastwood's character in that film. By the end of it, when he has to bury him, he actually knows from the inside what this is like, and he's able to minister to him and his family so well and so beautifully. So that's the gift, it seems to me. That's the blessing that can come from sickness or from suffering that our Catholic faith offers. And I think so many people, when it comes to sickness and suffering, don't know what to do with it. And a lot of times I think that's why people may leave the church. It's like, God must hate me. He must be ignoring me. And we don't have enough people walking with others through those difficult times. And that's the church of accompaniment and the church of listening that Pope Francis is talking about. It's not like a soft church like we're wimpy. It's actually that we are entering into the heart of true suffering in other human beings that gives meaning. You know?
We don't have enough people who could cry with other people.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing. You know, I mean, and whether that suffering is physical or economic, even, I've walked with a lot of poor people, in Central America and certainly in Mexico, and seeing that kind of suffering too, I think changes you, and it allows you to say, okay, am I willing to kind of accompany these people along the way? Or what is it that is pushing me away from that? Those are the things that I need to get rid of in my life. Those are the things that I need to kind of take a look at and say, okay, why am I not willing to walk with this person? What am I so afraid of? And it takes a lot to kind of, push that aside and then just say, okay, let me enter into this now.
We've talked about this before, and I just watched the interview on Pints with Aquinas with Matt Fradd and John Eldredge, who wrote Wild at Heart. And there's a clip on there where they talk about how we Catholic Christians, particularly men, can grasp to church teaching, which is true, without getting into the heart of things.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so it becomes an intellectual exercise that I know the right teachings here, but I use those teachings somehow to keep someone else or even myself distant from my own heart and what's going on there. And Eldredge has this great line where he says, the heart, the mind is meant to help the heart, not protect it from, I forget his exact line. I'll show you the clip or you can share it. Yeah. But it's a really beautiful way of integrating the head and the heart. And even someone like Matt Fradd, who oftentimes admits, he's a pretty acerbic guy at times.
Absolutely.
But he talks about in his own life when he was a young father, he'd make his kids, do the night prayer with him, and he was very strict. And then he read something by some saint who said, no, the end of the night prayers is supposed to be a hearth, and just let the kids play and goof around, but you're praying, it just should be a warm place where they can feel loved. And I thought, that's pretty cool. And I think that's a lot of what's going on here. It's the opening, it's the radical opening of the human heart. That's not opposed to church teaching. Correct. It's actually an embodiment of it when you're doing it right.
Yeah. But you can live up in your head all day long. Yeah. I mean, it's the thing that drives me crazy all the time. And so I'm like, okay, if I have to hear of one more person who said, I came to the church through intellectual, an intellectual study, mostly of philosophy or something along those lines. But then when I continue to hear them talk, there's no meat on the bones. It's like they haven't experienced that in some way. Yeah. And it can go the other way too, right? Someone who only has experience, who never, puts it into church teaching.
Right, and becomes all subjective and feeling.
Yeah, right.
It's the uniting, it's the both and.
It's the both and, right.
The underlining principle of our podcast is the both and.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So anyway, I'm glad I'm feeling a little bit better. I'm still coughing a little bit, as you could probably hear. But,
and I hope your sickness was a gift and blessing. And
it was.
Maybe one that you continue to discover. And that's the other thing about...
I blessed my wife with the sickness, too, because now she has it. So.
But about suffering and sickness, rarely can you appreciate it or be grateful for it when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, that's right.
It's only after you've come out on the other side that you can look back and say, oh, like... I was thinking about the Transfiguration. That was the gospel last week. So Jesus takes the guys up the hill, shows them himself and his glory. And they're like, we talked about it last week. But after he rose from the dead and then ascended to the Father, they're probably thinking, oh, that's what he was trying to show us there. And it's in looking back on things and exploring our memory and reflecting on it that we actually come to deeper knowledge of things. So sometimes it's going back on our experiences and seeing, oh, God was at work there. I felt like he hung me out to dry and abandoned me when in fact he was there. And as cheesy as it sounds, it's that Footprints poem. Yeah. And this is why Luke Brown, who runs what is it called? Sacred Heart Counseling. He says that's why you find it at all the thrift stores and garage sales, because people like, that's actually not reality. But in fact, it kind of summarizes Christian faith pretty well, as cheesy as it may seem as a magnet.
My takeoff on that is that there's one set of footprints where he carried you, but then there are these two huge lines in the sand. That's where he dragged me. And I'm not willing to go, and he said, "Come on, you're coming anyway." Yeah. But it's funny, the Transfiguration stuff that you were saying is I had a similar take, but sort of opposite in some ways, is that, during the good times, we fail to think about, the suffering moments in our lives sometimes, and we think, oh, everything's just fine. And that's Peter at this Transfiguration. He immediately runs right in and says, this is the greatest thing ever. Let's never leave. And he's like not even listening to what Elijah and Moses are saying to Jesus, saying, no, Jerusalem. We have to go to Jerusalem now, and you have to die. And he just doesn't want to even hear it.
Well, that's very much connected. I'm just thinking this as you say it, to when Jesus predicts his path. Well, he says, you are the Son of God. Okay, you didn't get this from yourself. And then the next thing he says, and I'll never let this happen to you. And then he says, get behind me, Satan, because Jesus knows that he has to suffer in order to save us. And Peter does not want to go through that suffering. And it's only when Peter betrays Jesus, not once, but twice, 3 times, and he hits rock bottom, that he becomes totally dependent on God's mercy, that his heart is open enough to actually receive what God has been planning for him all along, which is most of our stories anyway. Right? It's when you realize I am completely dependent upon God, and it's usually through great suffering and sickness and pain that happens. It's Leonard Cohen, ring the bells that still can ring, forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So, if you can find your cracks, your brokenness, your fractures, praise God, because that's where he wants to enter into your life, because that's what he came to do, to heal you,
Amen.
And me and Deacon Mike too. So
exactly. You know who heals things?
I don't think it's briefcase marketing, but maybe it is. Can you make it so?
Well, I mean, they could heal if your website's broken. It needs to be healed.
Very good.
Very
good.
You need to be able to pick this thing up and say, let's make it all nice and pretty now. Come on.
Yeah, maybe it's like it's crusty and old, and you need new life to your I love that word, crusty, to your website, your parish website. So Briefcase Marketing creates marketing for your church or church-based ministry that inspires action and delivers results.
They'll clarify your message to attract the right audience. They'll streamline your website to convert mere visitors into customers, donors, volunteers, parishioners. They'll create consistency to build trust and deepen relationships across all of your marketing platforms, emails, ads, social media.
Do you need proof? Briefcase Marketing gets great Google reviews. They've done superb work with our friends at Theology, the Body Cleveland, and St. John Cantius Parish in Tremont, and we'll put samples of that work in our show notes and make it easy for you to check them out.
With a clear message and a compelling website, Briefcase Marketing will help you get more donors giving to your mission, more volunteers ready to serve, more people sharing your message, and they will become your advocates.
So visit their website. That's briefcase.marketing. We've got their link in the show notes, or text 308-627-1262. And our pal, Dan First, will take good care of you at Briefcase Marketing.
All right. Church Search, Cathedral St. John, congratulations again.
Oh, thank you.
Lots of stuff going on.
Yeah, so the cathedral is I think 175 years old. Mm-hmm. We're celebrating that this year. Now, it's gone under some transformation since then. Originally, 9th Street, East 9th Street here was called Erie Street.
Oh, okay.
And you know that because if you're at the Progressive Field on the east side of 9th, you'll see Erie Street Cemetery.
Oh,
so that was the original name of the street. And what else can I tell you other than we have confessions here every day, Monday through Friday, 6:30 in the morning, Mass every day, 7:15, and then confessions every day, 11:30 to 12:30, and Mass every day at noon. And I am in the midst of planning some new event this summer. I think we're gonna be calling it Wednesday Evenings Live, every Wednesday evening from May 28th to the last Wednesday of August. We'll have Vespers in the church at 5:30, and then we'll have live music on the Jubilee stage. We're preparing the Luce lawn, and then we're going to maybe have a beer garden even, if we can figure it out with legal. So the bishop would like more activity happening at our mother church here in downtown Cleveland, and part of my job as the new parochial vicar is to see that happens. So super excited about it.
So it'll be fun. So Cathedral St. John here in Cleveland. And let's take a look at the third Sunday of Lent readings. First reading, Burning Bush this week.
Oh, love the Burning Bush. So the Burning Bush, to me, presents the great both and, as we were talking about before. Why? Because the bush is on fire, and at the same time, it's not being consumed. Usually when things are on fire, they're burning up. They're becoming less of what they are. Mm-hmm. This is a great example of God's non-competitive love for us, that when we let him in our life, it doesn't make us any less than who we are. It makes us more of who we are. And it's one of these mysteries that shouldn't be able to happen, but does. The mystery that Jesus is both God and man without being any less man by being, or any less God by being both, or Mary is both virgin and mother at the same time. So I absolutely love the Burning Bush. How about you?
Yeah, same. So it'll be good. The I always like the remove your shoes so you're standing on holy ground. That Moses doesn't even realize where he's standing, and he's just kind of like, "Whoa, wait a minute, what's going on?"
Yeah.
But as he starts to understand, he realizes this is the Lord that will lead them through the Exodus and to save his people. So all good.
Let me just say this now because I'm going on Flannery O'Connor pilgrimage this weekend. If you ever read the short story Parker's Back, it's about the guy with all the tattoos. There's a scene in the short story where he becomes a kind of Moses. There is fire and his shoes fall off. So I won't say any more than that, but if you're preparing yourself and your heart for this weekend's liturgy and you say, I'd like to read some good fiction, maybe by a Southern woman, American Catholic, read Parker's Back.
There you go. Flannery O'Connor, Parker's Back. We'll have this and a whole lot more next time here on Question of Faith.